Hi, everybody. I'm going to finish up Chapter 21, and we're going to get right into 22 on this lecture. So this will actually be the first of the Chapter 22 lectures that I post. I was just talking about lymphatic nodules on the last chapter. And these are structures that are found throughout the body in areas where potential dangerous pathogens can get into our system. So the respiratory system and our digestive system are two major ways that pathogens try to get in. They go in through the oral or through the respiratory route to get into our system. And so we have these special structures, these nodules, that are found throughout our tissue, and in certain areas they form large aggregations called mucosal associated lymphatic tissue. This is going to be found in those regions, and it houses lots and lots of B and T lymphocytes, so that any pathogens that try to get through and into our body are going to be killed off before they can cause harm. One of the areas where we have a huge collection of malt is the Peyer's patches of the small intestines. And now we're getting into the immune system and our body defenses. This is a little fun video that you can watch. Hank Green gives us, I don't know if it's Hank, but it's one of the guys, gives us an overview of some of the most deadly organisms on Earth, or I won't say organisms, deadly microbes, that's what I can say, that cause disease and kill. And so I love these pictures. I picked these pictures out because it shows white blood cells attacking. It shows B lymphocytes producing antibodies-ish. This is obviously a picture. Bacteria and viral particles. So our immune system is what actually protects us from pathogenic agents, or agents that can be considered harmful to us. They work continuously without us even realizing that they're doing any work. A lot of our energy goes into providing ourselves with immunity to different agents. So the most common agents that our immune system will fight up against is going to be things like bacteria or bacterial receptors, viruses, fungi, protozoans, other parasitic organisms. These are typically the things that are called pathogens. But not all bacteria are pathogenic, and some viruses aren't human pathogens. There's some fungi and protozoans that are very beneficial to the world, including multicellular organisms, but if they are parasites, they are parasitic. So, we talk about not just specific immune system, we also talk about non-specific defenses that our body has. And so we have a lot of white blood cells that we talked about in Chapter 18. Including neutrophils, eosinophils, and basophils. These are our granulocytes, and then our monocytes, which are agranulocytes. And none of these are actually specific defenders. These guys are all non-specific defenders. They will attack and fight off lots of different potential pathogens or irritations to the body. We also have these lymphocytes. Lymphocytes typically are considered our specific defenders or our immune system cells. So B and T lymphocytes are what make up our immune system. And then we have these things over here called natural killer cells. Natural killer cells are not specific or do not provide specific immunity. What they do is they provide very good non-specific surveillance, and they constantly move around our system and attack any cells that are that contain non-self antigens on them. So all of these cells that we talked about are found in our lymphatic system, which is why the lymphatic system and immunity are talked about together. Lymphatic tissue, lymphatic organs, mucous membranes, connective tissue. They have these B and T lymphocytes. They're going to have macrophages, and they'll have natural killer cells found within these tissues. And then we have macrophages that are not found in these tissues. We have neutrophils, eosinophils, basophils that run around our system, constantly looking for potential dangers. I've talked about, or I just mentioned different things, but we have other organs outside of the lymphatic tissues that contain macrophages. So if you think about the dense, irregular connective tissues, our areolar connective tissue, our reticular connective tissue, these had macrophages associated with it. In our integument, in the stratum spinosum, we had dendritic cells. These are macrophages. And in the nervous system, we had microglial cells. These are macrophages. When we talk about the respiratory system, we're going to have these things called alveolar cells. They're macrophages. So we have these macrophages associated with almost every single organ system. And these guys are going to stay, and they will attack any potential dangerous materials that enter our tissue. I just talked about the dendritic cells that are found in the epithelium. So I just mentioned this. I'm not going to cover this again, okay? We also have in connective tissue, we have mast cells. And mast cells produce chemicals that help to decrease the thickness of blood. So they produce a chemical called heparin, and they also produce histamine. Very similar to what basophils do. Basophils secrete heparin and histamine to help increase blood flow to the site of damage and to cause the capillaries to become more leaky so that your neutrophils, your macrophages, your B and T lymphocytes can get to the site of damage and can start fixing everything. So here we have a bunch of cells that help us in either nonspecific defense mechanisms, so neutrophils, monocytes, eosinophils, and basophils all work in nonspecific defenses. We have lymphocytes and monocytes that work in our specific defenses, so monocytes can work in both. And here are different regions of the body where we will find these different organs, or where we will find these different cell types. So some of the chemicals that are released by either our B and T lymphocytes or by our body cells are called cytokines. Cytokines are tiny proteins that cause a reaction to occur. Some of the things that cytokines do, they cause inflammatory responses. They can actually cause holes to form inside the cell, to cause the cell to lysis open. They can stimulate a response to the chemical, causing like proliferation of a cell. So they have a lot of different activities that they can do depending on the cytokine type. So interleukin 2, interleukin 4, so here's an example is interleukin 2. Interleukin 2 and 4, they actually stimulate B and T lymphocytes to proliferate, producing lots of copies of themselves, and differentiate into either the active form or the memory cells. Tumor necrosis factor is going to cause a cell to undergo apoptosis, colony stimulating factor is going to stimulate the cell to start replicating, producing new cells. And interferon is a special chemical that's released by all of our body cells when they get infected with a virus, and it stimulates the cell to produce, or it stimulates all our neighboring cells to be protected or to produce chemicals that will protect them from the virus. There are two major groupings that we talk about in our immune system. We have our innate defense mechanisms, and then we have our specific or adaptive immune system. In your text, it talks about innate immunity and adaptive immunity. The thing about innate immunity, it's not really immune because you can get it over and over again. So innate is just a defense, and our nonspecific or innate defenses protect us from a lot of potential dangerous invaders, but they don't give us memory. They don't remember the invader, and so they're not going to be able to fight off the infection before it occurs, if that makes sense. Adaptive immunity is our third line of defense, and it will fight off the infection and then remember the infective agent so that if it ever comes into our system again, it will attack before our immune system, or not our immune system, before our body even has the ability to recognize that we are being invaded. So we're going to talk first about our innate defenses, and that will be on the next video because we're already at 11:48. So we'll talk about the innate defenses on the next video, and then we'll talk about adaptive defenses in a video or two ahead, okay? You have a wonderful day. Bye.